Greetings, Craig Bot.
That
Our
is the
Lord and
scariest
Savior.
thing in the world.
You said that's the scariest thing in the world.
That's
Yeah,
our
I
Lord
was
and
expecting
Savior.
a
Give him some
robot
more
to say,
respect.
"We are now recording."
We are now recording. Doodle
I swear
doo
to
doo
God,
doo.
you nearly killed me. We're not even in school, and you nearly killed me.
Craig Bot will be the death of us all, but we'll gladly take it.
Thank you, Craig Bot, for joining us today.
Yeah, he is.
Welcome to the podcast. My name is Mr. Eaton from Mr. Eaton's Weekly Videos. Everyone should know I'm at like 2 billion subs by now. Why don't you individuals go ahead and introduce each other? Introduce yourselves.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. My headphones are acting up. What's going on?
We're introducing each other. This is working out great for our first
Man,
one.
I was letting you take the floor first.
We're
Yeah,
introducing each
yeah,
other
go ahead.
or ourselves?
Introduce-
Yes, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
My name is Hollis Narkevich. Hello. All hail Craig Butt.
My name is Lamato. You can find me on my fighting game YouTube channel. Link will be in description below. All hail Craig Bot.
I am Zach, and I will date any female.
Optional. Females. Human. Optional. Alive.
All human, optional.
Optional.
Being dead is very optional. You know, if you're just a dead body, you can just
Maybe that's
put
why you're not
yourself
dating
on
anyone. You're just so picky, Zach. You gotta be open.
Yeah. I mean, if you're alive, it's okay. I prefer dead, but like,
I think we got our first topic now.
No, I think this is great. Because I just something popped in my head is like, what if in the future there is, not necessarily zombies, but people coming back from the dead? Is like, are we going to have armies of people defending the dead? Or is that going to be a form of discrimination in the future?
well,
Sorry,
depending on
man.
what
We
they're
only
like.
sell heart. We only sell the heart beaters in this restaurant.
See, if they're like full blown zombies, then I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna sit in my house and play video games. But if they're like half alive, I'm going in their pants down. You can't stop me.
Okay, I'm not a gamer, but let me ask you: if Call of Duty, isn't there like a zombie one? Whatever the zombie one is, that going to be
Yeah, Black
considered
Ops.
like a hate crime video game if there's zombies someday?
Oh my
I mean,
goodness!
you can beat up black people in GTA, so.
But not
Oh my.
exclusively, I don't think.
Oh yeah, you do got a point, but I mean, you can exclusively beat up black people in GTA if you really wanted to.
What an
I mean, like-
interesting start.
I
We haven't
mean,
even
like,
all.
Can you just imagine like the outpour of support from people that are like, dead people's rights?
Zombie lives matter.
Zombie lives matter.
The hand like
just-
falls off while they're like.
like they're just
That's
gnawing
a
on the
victim
neck
right
while
there. Help
someone's
him out.
saying that.
He bit my brain. Oh well, you're the suspect.
I don't know.
Lend
It's
a
your
hand.
fault. If you weren't wearing such naughty clothing, he wouldn't have been a chunk out of your earlobe.
Okay, that's the most supreme form of ageism in the world.
Lend a hand literally throws a hand. Not like that.
Ah,
He was practicing his rights, so
he was armed.
he was practicing his right to arms. Okay. Let him
yes,
off.
You know,
yes.
When
The
I was
second
when I was in 8th grade, there was some like dress up dance, and so I got my trench coat and I tried to look very suspicious, and I got a bunch of like hands
Oh
that like
god.
forearm and hands, and I walked in, looked at the lady in charge, and said, "I'm armed." And then I like pulled out my little plastic arm, and then I just went around the whole night going, "I'm armed. I'm an arms dealer. That's actually my job." And everybody got so sick of the pot. And then somebody would take my arm, and I go, "Oh, I'm disarmed." And I thought it was the funniest thing in the world because I love dad jokes, but everyone was just so sick of me by the end of the night.
It reminds me. Okay, so to add on to the puns, a little backstory here. My daughter likes to name all of her things, but she's not very good at naming things. So she just names it the item and then ends it with a Y. So she had a balloon and she gave it the name balloony. She has
Baloney.
a giraffe, so she calls it Giraffe. And I'm just thinking, if she had a bunch of arms like that, would she call it Army?
Okay.
How about Armsy?
It's someday.
Oh yeah,
Two things.
you're
Your
Mr.
daughter's
Eaton's
gonna
daughter.
discover
Name
two
everything.
things. Everything. But someday when your daughter's in therapy because she found out you were making fun of her on a very little trafficked podcast, they're gonna be like, have you ever heard of the show Pee-wee's Playhouse? And she's gonna be like, what's that? And he's gonna pull it out and show Pee-wee Herman sitting on Cherry, and it'll all be fine because if Pee-wee Herman did it, it was okay for your daughter to do it.
Wait, wouldn't that excuse also work for Wasn't he a pedophile?
No.
I think that was a
mean,
rumor.
He got in trouble for something, but it wasn't with a kid or anything.
Oh. Yeah, I can't exactly remember. Dude, that movie scarred me. Or at least
That's
like
a
one of
movie?
the.
Oh, the
Well,
Tim Burton
there
one?
is. Yeah, the one with
Pee-wee Herman,
The show
anything.
is different. Like
I
it's
know the
not
show's different, but
horrifying.
like that one scene where it goes, that one girl sent me, and like I don't know, just her face, the way he arranged it, it scared me.
Anyway, anything that Tim Burton directs is going to be a little bit twisted. And I love Corpse Bride and Nightmare Before Christmas is okay, but Coraline, it's a great movie, but it's not for children. Like,
It's boring.
it's not for children.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a wimp. Actually, take out the maybe. I'm a wimp, but still, not for children. Should not be. Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
My
Yeah. To not be.
my little brother actually loved the movie.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's just definitely not my thing.
What podcast?
What? No, the movies you're talking about.
I never really watched them, so I have no comment.
I have no life, so I can watch everything.
Is this a great transition?
This may as well be.
Life is nothing. Let's talk about nothing
Segways.
emphatically.
Make
Woo!
segues from now on.
Before we get into existentialism and nihilism, Joe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hey, I'm late, but you can just call me Joe.
Hello, late.
Hi, late.
I'm Dad.
Because I was late.
Oh, you weren't that late. Maybe 10.
22 minutes?
We didn't actually start recording until like 8 minutes ago.
I did, though.
Well, okay, Mr. Blue Yeti.
Well, okay then, Mr. Podcast Man.
Oh yeah, Mr. Podcast Man over here. We doing a podcast. Speaking about
I
Mr.
have a
Podcast
bucket hat.
To each week, one of the members of this podcast gets to choose the topic. In round 0, Lamato kind of chose the.
We're going back to that someday.
I know. We'll do a more in depth of Revenge of the Sith, but that was kind of like our episode 0, and as episode 1, we're going to be digging into the things that may or may not make us have anxiety fueled lives by talking about existentialism and its more famous brother, nihilism.
Okay, before we start the discussion,
Philosophy.
can I provide a couple
Yeah.
sources of information for anyone who happens to hear this and wants to see a more unbiased opinion of what we're talking? I'm assuming, just like an expert opinion. A couple places that could things. A couple places I like to look at.
Go for it.
Okay, I would just suggest, as far as websites go, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy is a great place to go. That's normally my first place to look when I'm doing any sort of research. If you want something a little lighter, I would suggest Sisyphus 55 on YouTube is a great intro to philosophy. And in more absurd thinking I would suggest Exurbia, XURB1A, for some sources of philosophy.
Nice.
Thank you.
I thought we would start with the little brother first, which is existentialism. This is just the definition from Wikipedia. I know a teacher using Wikipedia, but it's a simple definition, which is it's a form of philosophical inquiry that explores the problems of human existence and centers on the lived or lived experiences of our thinking, feeling, and acting individuals. So as individuals, we experience the life, and then we kind of start thinking what we start thinking about the possibilities of why, just why, just why.
Just why? And that's existentialism.
Yes.
Ever since I entered college, I've always thought about, wow, I'm in college. I guess it's time for me to start thinking about my life. And after mulling over it for a couple of months through my ups and downs, I really think that how I want to perceive life, on how to achieve happiness in life, how to fulfill one's life, is to basically go about the way of the pursuit of happiness. And I know the pursuit of happiness has a bunch of minor or major problems once you get into the deep down of it all, but how I see it is, for me to have a fulfilling life, a happy life, which is, I think, the goal of all people, is to have a happy, fulfilling life. Because everyone feels good when they're happy. Everyone feels happy when they're good. So why wouldn't people want to feel this way? So I think that's primarily the goal that all people want to achieve. Some people are happy by staying in all day, or staying in with loved ones, or being around people they love. Some people are happier going out and achieving things. And that's all in their own pursuit of happiness. And I feel like everyone should be able to chase or pursue their happiness. And that should be the goal of people in general, or human Homo sapiens, people like us who have enough processing speed in their brains to just think about, what do I want in life? And I think that thing that people want in life is the pursuit of happiness, to achieve one's own desires, and all that stuff.
I want to actually touch on that quite a bit.
I would also you go first.
Yeah, okay. I've had the desire ever since senior year of high school. It's just I kind of figured out, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to go with my life, and just get the best of it. Just fully understand, okay, this is what's bringing me happiness. And you know what it was? People. People like you guys. Most of you know this. Some of you probably didn't, because we weren't in close groups or clubs. But anyway, it's just, when I left high school, I kind of had that feeling in my heart where it's just my true desire is just to see other people succeed. That's what brings me happiness. Seeing other people happy, seeing other people just succeed in their lives. That really just fills me up. And and I even talked with my counselor a lot about this going into college, because it's it was a new playing field. It was it was kind of just this, what is it? College was that new playground for me, honestly. I didn't know anybody there. There were a few people I knew, but they were wrapped up in their own thing. So it's I had to get to know new people. And it's just that idea where it's just how do I get to really know these people? How can I truly support these people in between classes and activities, even during after school and all that stuff? It's just, my point is, honestly, just extrovertism is really where I'm at. And it's my energy to get through the day. Just to talk to people, to be with people, around with people. That's what brings me happiness, honestly. And that's what college really taught me, and especially high school at the near end of it all. But it comes to that point as well where it's just like, if I don't get that kind of energy, if I don't get that energy from other people, then I'm kind of drained. Then I'm kind of like, oh, what do I do? What do I do, honestly? Like, there's two opposite sides to the coin. It's just like, I'm happy when I'm around people, but I really got nothing when I'm on my own, besides my own devices. But still, that's just something I wanted to touch on. Probably touch on later. You can go ahead, Hollis.
Thank you. I'm probably going to butcher my explanation this because I'm not always the most eloquent. But I would say, first and foremost, I'm going to be 16. I don't know nearly anything, but in my short number of years, I looked at other people's point of views, and there's one that I tend to agree with a lot, and it's that life's goal isn't necessarily happiness, because life's goal is more of contentment than I would say it is for happiness. Because the person I'm very roughly quoting this from had made the case that a lot of people go through life thinking there's I need to do these set number of things and then I will be happy. I need to accomplish this and buy this and marry this person and have X number of kids and then I will be happy. But happiness is never a constant, just like sadness is never a constant. If I'm happy, I might be happy for a little while, but I'm not going to be happy 24 hours a day always, because it's not something that you feel all the time. It's like a treadmill. You can run and run and run, but you're never really going to reach and you might be some people feel that with religion or sure, and dwelling in that kind of mundanity is what helps you. To
An
touch on this.
emotion in the moment. You're happy in the moment, but it's something that what's called people want. That is definitely something people want to be happy. People want a lot of things, and I feel like I myself also want to be a lot happy. I'm happy. I could be a lot happier, but what's called being content. I can also see why people want to be content, because to be content is to be comfortable. To be content is to feel, to have everything around you be normal, and things around you that are normal are comfortable, and you get used to it. People get used to the normal, people get used to comfortable, people get used to being content, and that's what a lot of people strive to like have to be like, because I know like a lot of life, especially me growing up, it was a lot of struggles and like not being content, having to have less and be less fortunate to go on day by day.
It kind of makes me wonder if the worse of a childhood that you have, the more that you're willing to try to fight. Maybe fight's not the right word, but to gain ground into
To press on, really.
Yeah, to get to that level where you are happy. It's interesting to juxtapose that with like people who have already don't really have to do much because they've already made it, because they are born into wealth and riches, and they can have anything at their fingertip. But that doesn't bring them happiness. It's just they now have all of these things that
Means to do
can bring like moments of joy, but it's not real joy. I wonder then if the more that you have to battle to fight for happiness, you feel more fulfilled than if it's already like given you, or it's like right there in front of you already.
I think that's why I think I would agree with that. I think that's why you hear so many great stories about people who might not have grown up with a father, and they were poor and they grew up and had kids of their own, and they had to work 2 or 3 jobs so that their children could have the opportunities they did. I'm not saying that that would be happiness, but I think that'd be the fight you're describing. It's almost I wouldn't say living vicariously through others, but you want to provide the things that you might not have had. And I think contentment doesn't necessarily mean you're giving up, but it just means if happiness would just be, I am always going to be happy in this moment. I'm going to be full of joy at every moment, and that's not a realistic standard. But I would say contentment is, this is my life. This is maybe who I married. This is where I live. I can strive for better things, but I'm happy with what I have. And that's where you're saying money doesn't equate to happiness. People who are rich can still be happy with the money they have, and because they're thankful for what they have received and what they have. And even if you're poor, if you're thankful for the little things, that's what keeps you going. And contentment, I would just say, is being thankful for what you have and finding a base level of it's basically happiness, but it's just with the understanding that sometimes I'm going to be sad and angry and things won't go my way. But I understand that I have a good life and I should be thankful for it.
Okay, so I got a little bit of a thought experiment for you.
Go ahead.
This is still on the same topic, and it's something that poets for years have kind of thought about and have argued over, which is, and philosophers as well, which is, when you were young, it's not going to the park that brings you happiness. It's the thought of going to the park. It's not running to the merry-go-round. It's the thought of going to the merry-go-round. And a lot of poets have even written about, it's not doing that brings you joy. It's the thoughts of doing that bring you joy.
I think I could definitely see that in a figurative and literal way. First, speaking in a literal way, like the idea of something can produce like chemicals within your head or body, and that generally makes you experience happy feelings or what's called excitement or adrenaline. It's like watching a movie or something like that, or what's called reading a book, and even though you're not experiencing it, although you feel it in your body, the excitement, the funniness, the sadness. That's the more literal way I see when it says like the thought of it, even though you're not experiencing yourself, like the thought of it is what you enjoy. That's yeah, that's how I see it in the literal way. But in the figuratively way, this is going to be more harder to explain and kind of confusing, but in a figurative way, when to what you said, I can't like say it word for word right now. Something. Can you say it again for me? I'm losing. I'm losing
Bro,
my.
so like it's the idea of doing something that makes you happy versus actually living and doing the thing that you wanted to do is what I was arguing.
Yes. See it figuratively is like reminiscing among the past, probably. That you can think of all these, what's it called? You can remember all these like past experiences that you did experience, and just like think about it, and like that could also, and what's it called? You can also think about the joy it brought you to do those things. You can think about the joy it brought, like the anticipation it brought, and then there's the actual like experience doing it. And I've completely lost my train of thought.
It's almost as if you're having an existential crisis.
I wouldn't say existential crisis. I think I just need a little bit more time to think it through, because this is all in the moment type of talking.
I think to help you out a little bit, I'll try to give an example of how I feel with this little bit of talk. Give you a little bit of time, Joe. But
Please do.
there's always something in my head. I'm like, man, I want to go back and do this. I want to rewatch this show. I actually want to pick up this brand new show that I've never seen. There's all these movies, these trilogies I just want to watch. And I just think like, man, that would be so much fun. Then I think about it, and then I'm like, okay, let's do it. But then I get caught up. But then it's just like, I still keep thinking, yep, I'm going to do it someday. I'm going to do it. And it comes to that point where I just think of it so much, and I'm like, yeah, I would, but I could also be doing something else. I could be thinking of something else or doing something else. And even like touching on like, stuff that I've done in my past as well. I haven't really watched anime like fully, like any new series for quite a couple of years now. And it comes to that point where like, man, this show looks pretty neat. I think I'll check it out, and never do. Because it's just that idea of like, it looks neat, but where's my time going to go with it?
There's almost a level of regret that can come from being
Yes.
excited about something and being let down. I mean,
There's
that's
always
why,
that level.
yeah.
And also the other thing is I am that person that always likes to plan out his day, like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do this thing this hour, I'm gonna do this thing for like a couple hours, and then completely go off the rails. And as soon as the day ends and I look back and I'm like, wasn't I supposed to do this stuff? Then I kind of just be like, huh, well, that didn't go as planned. So it's that bit of regret in a sense.
I think from a non-philosophical point of view, for one thing, like even if you had, I'll give you an example here. If the last year we had our marching band competition, we drove out. It was freezing cold. It was raining, and we went out there and we played. We got second place. It was a great day for everyone. But thinking back on that, I don't think about the freezing cold rain and like being very miserable in the moment. I was thinking of the larger picture, and I think your brain tends to romanticize things and just make them more, easier to think about. That's why sometimes people will block out trauma, and they'll like if you have a long road trip to the Grand Canyon, you might not remember the road trip. I do. I like road trips, but you might not remember the road trip as much as the actual experience you had going there. And if you had everything, this is on a separate note, talking about how the build up can sometimes be better than the thing you want. I think that might be because if you could just get anything you wanted at any time, you wouldn't have anything to look forward to, and that takes out a bit of happiness. Like if I think of, I don't know, a birthday, you don't have to get a ton of gifts. Maybe you don't get any gifts, but let's say you got one thing. You sold them. You told your family, I really like this thing. I like this thing. Get whatever that thing would be, and you're really excited because you waited and they gave you something you wanted. But if I just bought that thing and it came and I had it, I wouldn't have looked forward to receiving that thing. I know I'm saying thing a lot here, but looking forward to things, even tiny things, can really make people happier in the long term. My mother, she's a great lady, but when she was 18, to Yugoslavia with my grandparents and stuff, and it was a communist country at the time, and she always told us, you had to have little things you would look forward to, because there really wasn't really anything there. So like that thing might be, we're gonna have a special little treat with breakfast at the end of the week, maybe, and just the anticipation, looking forward to it all week, was just as good as having whatever it was. And I think people tend to need that, because let's say I couldn't have a chocolate bar, like ever. Could never have a chocolate bar. They weren't available to me. There was no way I could possibly get them. And one time a year, I could get a little piece of chocolate. That would be such a huge treat, because you've been looking forward to it. It's not a normal thing you have. But if I could just have a chocolate bar every day, I don't think I'd be excited about it. I'd be like, oh yeah, here's the chocolate. Like it wouldn't be anything to look forward to.
Okay, so
I
there's
think
a
that's
short
kind
story.
of what they're saying. I finish this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm just saying that was what I think. The poets and philosophers are kind of saying. Everybody has their own opinions on that when there's art and stuff. So yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's a short story that kind of touches on what you just said, except it's not candy bars, it's rain. So, for some reason, out of nowhere in the short story, rain kills you. And it's not because it's acid rain, it's not because there's just, for some reason, if you get touched by the rain, you die. So, the story involves a young girl. She's like 9 or 10 years old, and she remembers being, a little bit younger and playing in the rain and just, having a lot of fun. And it gets just the anticipation of knowing that you can't be in the rain just gets to her. And the whole story is about her going out one last time into the rain and just playing in the puddles and letting the rain hit her. And everyone around is looking in
I've
horror.
heard this one.
You've heard about this one?
I think we read this one in 8th grade.
Really? And they're looking at in horror as, she's playing in the rain for one last time and she's so happy. And then she collapses and dies.
Exactly what you're talking. They're like, yeah. We actually had to read that. It was a really interesting story. It would have been a little more interesting if we hadn't looked at it from like a literary point of view. Just like, what do you think the girl was thinking? Like there wasn't any like deep thought in reading.
Deep Thoughts with Eaton. Why is the girl a girl? I don't know.
Is the girl wearing a blue dress? Now, what if I told you the blue dress signified something? The Vsauce theme starts playing.
Dang.
Now, tell me the author's thoughts when writing that she has a blue dress.
Now, this is unrelated, but like the big joke in English one, like honors, is that the curtains being blue means something. And if we hadn't have had school canceled, I was legitimately going to purchase some like green cloth and replace the curtains in Eaton's room one Friday so that they were just green one day, and we'd have to discuss the big deep change and what that meant. And I think that would have been the best prank in the world, but unfortunately didn't work out.
I love the idea of that so much.
Maybe in comp. Maybe that's what I'll do for comp.
Right.
Hopefully I'm not incompetent at it.
I've already came up. Okay, a little off topic, but I already came up with like the perfect start of the class. I'm so excited about this. I was going to pass out an essay to everyone and then say, this essay would get an F in my class. You're going to team up with 3 people and you're going to create a presentation as to why.
And it's just a perfect essay.
No, it'd be a really bad essay.
Oh, I thought it was going to be like Pam going to Creed and with the same picture and going, corporate needs you to find the differences between these two pictures in the same picture. It's just like a really good essay, but we're explaining why it's bad, and you're like, okay, so fun fact, all the things you said are wrong, or that's the syllabus. Let's get into it.
Oh, that would just make everyone want to melt.
Perfect start.
You know, I remember essays that I wrote. I remember back when I was in creative writing, and we'd get like prompts on like daily journals, and everyone would answer. It'd have to be like 2 paragraphs probably, but like me, nah, I was different. For I questioned the question, and that's what I wrote for my question prompt. I wrote about how the question in general is I basically asked what kind of question would this is the question today's question prompt, and then I would go on throwing out like random details and references about what I thought about the question, like my own personal. Granted, I was like I was like a really good creative writing. Well, I like to think I was a really good creative writing student. Uh, I was always told my creative writing skills were really good by the teacher, and yeah, I mean, I almost failed the class, but that was because kind of like always turn in my homework late because I would I would get stuck with writer's block, and it wasn't until the day of that it'd be unblocked, and then I'd have to write my entire essay that day. Then I couldn't get to it because it'd be like 3 pages long.
No,
Sometimes I did. Sometimes I did get it done, a 3-page like essay or story in one day. But usually, like I'd be late by one day.
now I'd like to
I
on the
want to go
top.
through my old. I really do want to go through all my old stories and like read them now.
I got a very similar story to like what Joe had. It just like it was April last year and I was in freshman comp 2 and I finally had time to sit down and just like finally work on classes because I was falling behind a little bit because of pandemic, but I just remember looking at my freshman comp 2 class and I'm like, I have like 20 papers to write before the end of the semester. And they're all about topics that I've never understood before, never heard of, or just, well, of course, never heard of, but still. Because even previous topics in the class was just like, this was so disturbing. Just for one example, one topic was about the idea of babies being suffocated by their mothers who were high on drugs while asleep at night, and they were found dead the next morning.
That would be an interesting thing to write about. I'll give them that.
Yes, but for me, it was just like, nah, this just wasn't it. And of course, besides the fact, like, I had to drop my freshman Comp 2 class during second semesters, then I had to retake it in the summer, but then I had to retake it with a different teacher, and her topics I just found so much more interesting, because they were all based on stuff that I actually had interest in. Artificial intelligence, television, the internet. Just like very deep lookings at each of these topics, and even many others.
Now let me present to you all an alternative kind of thought experiment of sorts. We're gonna go through this quick scenario. Now imagine it's freshman year. You're not too cocky. You know you're the lowest on the social order. You got your books in your one hand and your pencils in the other. Your palms a little sweaty. You're a little nervous. You don't know how this is gonna go. It's the last day of the week, so what's the worst that could happen? So you walk in, find your seat, pull out your pencil, ready to write your essay. You know, you're a good kid, never done. And a man walks in and you hear, "It's Friday, which means it's free ride Friday." And And just like every other Friday, you have to write 75 words or more. And just like every other Friday, I have a song for you. What
That was
would
the start of
you
my
do?
sophomore year.
What
Thank
would
you.
you do?
I would
Flashback.
play the song because it was
Flashback
my
to the
time to
one
play the
time
song.
you played Gorillas. You played
You
Lives
know, you
Incorporated.
actually made
Right
me
as I
feel
had just
something.
finished it, and I was like, "This is fate."
You actually made me like feel sad for the person, and then you just pulled me out of off the rug.
Sorry.
Oh man, I. It's just not the same this year doing the Free Write Fridays, which has kind of given me an existential
Ava
issues as
doesn't
well.
do that. She almost quotes Bill and Ted every day. She always goes, "All right, friends, be safe, be excellent." And I'm like, "And party on, dudes. Oh, just say it. Say it. Oh, God.
And party on, dudes.
Be excellent to each other. Party on, dude.
Yeah.
Diddle-diddle-doo.
Wayne's World. Different movie.
Never seen that one.
Same energy.
Never seen Wayne's World? Wow.
No, I've never seen Wayne's World.
I'd say it's worth a watch.
Like,
It will make you
I know of the
happy on the
scene-
notion of having to watch
I know
it.
of the scene about the product placement, and it seems like the perfect satire.
But it also works as the product placement because it's
Yeah.
the movie needs it
Did
to
that was
get
that
funding.
actual product
Yes,
placement?
yes it was.
I think a prime example of like making the advertisement part of it is like in Arrested Development. There's one episode where they're in the show. One of the characters is being hired to sign away his family rights to be on the show. And the guy's like, "All right, we're gonna get a location at Burger King." And throughout the entire episode, they're like, "Man, I'm hungry. I'm gonna go to Burger King," and they'll like hop over something and like go on their way to Burger King, or they'll be eating at Burger King and they're like, "Man, these Whoppers are delicious and affordable," and it's just like the perfect joke in the context of the story.
That kind of reminds me of Mounds, or not Mounds. The Boys and Almond Joys. That's what it was. You could tell that Almond Joys sponsored certain episodes of The Boys season 2.
Is that the Amazon, the superhero one?
And in one of the episodes, like this person who is basically indestructible is about to kill basically one of the main characters, and this other character comes out of nowhere, takes out an Almond Joy and shoves it down his throat. And he's like, what did you do that for? He's allergic to nuts. It's like, that's so perfect.
Is that worth watching, that show?
I would say so, yes. It's
Okay.
great social commentary.
You know, I will say this is completely unrelated, but the Amazon is going to be making a Lord of the Rings show, and I think it's what's I can't think of the name. It's like Fall Numenor or something, and it's like prior to the events of the Silmarillion and on to his like he's written a couple like textbooks of the history of Rohan and all that, but they're going to make it like Game of Thrones, and they're going to make it sexual, and that's disappointing to me.
Oh,
Because Lord of the Rings is like such a perfect example of so many things, like what a very well balanced man could be. Like they're very gentle man. And it's a really good show. Tolkien technically, I don't think you would classify him as a trans. You know what I mean? They believe you're one with nature. You gotta. Mark Twain was a
transcendentalist.
transcendentalist. That's how you say it. He's not a transcendentalist, but he has. I think he has the like airs of that kind of in his books with the elves and different things. And I feel like a lot of that nuance is going to be lost in this if you're just like, wow, Sauron has a private part. Isn't that fun? Like it's not the format you do that. I'm just a little disappointed. I love that series, and I'm a little disappointed by that. Also, do you guys know who Ralph Waldo Emerson is?
It would make me not believe
Familiar.
So Ralph Waldo Emerson
Absolutely.
was, I think he was I cannot pronounce this. Was he? Maybe not. Let me fact check.
He was a transcendentalist. Yes.
Okay,
He
I
was
thought he
very
might be.
much into nature, and
I find that
he's
interesting.
written a lot of fascinating essays on stuff like perseverance and self.
Let me just. I want to fact check this really quickly. I want to see which book it was.
Does that? Let's. I'm gonna move on to the Big Brother now, which is
Can I say one last thing?
nihilism.
It leads into that well. I just want to say that I find it interesting. Nietzsche is like a very big figure in nihilism. He's the guy who said God is never one of them, and he always carried around a copy of Emerson's poems, which is really interesting because Emerson's. I'd say he's a very encouraging writer. He kind of talks about the value of life and nature and humanity and how that can coexist. And it's kind of interesting that such a famous nihilist would enjoy his poetry.
Yeah, that is quite interesting. By the way, I'm just this is from the Oxford Dictionary. This is the definition of nihilism. Excuse me, for anyone who needs like a definition, it's the rejection of all religious and moral principles and the belief that life is meaningless. So there is no meaning to a nihilist. So there's nothing. Like the conversation that we're having now would just be meaningless. I mean, if you look at our numbers of our first video on my YouTube channel, we had 14. So if we were to continue doing this and only get 14, what's the point, right? Why are we doing this at all?
For fun.
You know,
right?
That is the definition, but
For
not
practice.
all nihilists thought of that the same way.
Right.
And I know you're not saying that they necessarily do. I had brought up Philip Mainlander earlier, and I'm not gonna try and sum up his philosophy because it's a very complicated thing. But to me, he's the most optimistic pessimist ever. He took his own life when he was 30, but he also kind of believed that you should alleviate as much suffering from humanity as you can. And he didn't believe in nothing as much as, or he didn't. I need to be delicate on how I phrase this.
I mean, who's watching? The other 14 viewers?
You know, you say that, but it's more of like my I want to be accurate for myself. But what were you saying the definition of existentialism was from the Oxford Dictionary?
That definition was from existentialism. That one was from just good old fashioned Wikipedia, and basically it's just the people like. Actually, let me pull it up real quick. I want to also be as accurate as possible, but basically it's like a conversation. It's like it's the form of philosophical inquiry that explores the problems of human existence.
Okay.
And then nihilism is basically a rejection of existentialism by saying that everything is meaningless. So it's like almost answering the existential question: what is the meaning of life? What do our feelings mean? What do our actions mean? And an nihilist, I know the answer.
Would a nihilist
Mainlander
try to find meaning in anything, or would they just believe that nothing has meaning and just live
Nothing
their
is
own
the
life?
That's kind of how Mainlander looked at it. Was that he almost worshipped nothing, which is a weird way to say that, but he almost worshipped nothing. That was just the answer. It wasn't life has no point. The point of life is nothing. He believed that the universe, which, was basically God. He was basically saying that God realized that life was nothing and that it was just pain. And since he was God, he couldn't kill himself. So he slowly fragmented himself until he lost all will of being. And he thinks that is basically the thought is that he thinks that is all that can happen with humanity. All history is driving towards a point, and that point is nothing. We all come from nothing. We all go to nothing. That's kind of, I would say, if most people would say, well, there's no point. I would say he'd say the point is nothing. He really liked a guy named Schopenhauer, who said, such things as human life must be some kind of mistake, which is a fairly famous thing. And looking at Mainlander's life, it would make sense why. He shared some opinions with Nietzsche, and they both lived in tough times and were briefly in an army or the other. But yeah, it's a Mainlander's kind of a contradictory man. He thought that he pointed out how everything was unified and fragmented. So some days you could feel at one with everyone in the world, and the next day you could feel so alone. Like the idea of being alone in a crowd. But yeah, he was a weird guy. But he was very optimistic, and both he was the most optimistic pessimist I can look at. There's a very interesting video by Sisyphus55 that gives you a basic introduction and some sources if you are interested. That was my first introduction to him. Sorry, I dominated quite a bit of time there, but whoever's next can go ahead. That's just one differing view in nihilism.
So, I think, and I might have a bias towards this because Derrida is definitely not someone that I knew of until my master's program, but Jacques Derrida is a very interesting nihilist. He is the creator of the deconstruction theory of literature, which is my favorite theory, as I have stated numerous times. It is basically the idea that every possible ideas of meaning that we construct is in itself meaningless. So if you have ever taught or you ever thought to yourself, why do we care why the curtains are blue? Symbolisms don't really exist. Everything is dumb. Why should we come up with themes? If you've ever had that train of thought, Derrida would be very happy with you because he says that all we are a bunch of pretenders pretending to pretend. All we do is put on a show. And that our real selves, when we're alone, we also put on a show to ourselves so that we can validate the way that we treat others and the way that we act towards others as well. We're all putting on a show. We all think we're part of some sort of huge play, and it's all fake.
It's like
Even when you try not to do stuff for other people, you're doing exactly what people think you're doing.
I would
say
about with everybody pretending, that's something that you could definitely look at and kind of apply, because and somebody made this distinction to me once, and it kind of it hurts to think about a little bit, but our society and our world runs on the idea that pieces of cloth and paper have purpose, and that if I give you those things, you will give me things, and that if I follow the rules that we've come up with, nothing bad will happen to me. And looking at even language and thinking about how that works in accordance to everything really hurts to think about. But just the way that there's no real set punishment if we didn't all buy into the same general ideas, which is kind of amazing that America, for example, can function so well the way it does. With that in mind, because everybody just kind of goes along, and I don't know. That was a waste of 2 minutes of explanation.
Oh, I don't think it was a waste. In fact, Dorita would say this whole conversation's a waste.
Exactly, because there's no point when it comes to nihilism.
What's the point if it's a waste for 14 people?
Even the point is a waste
Those
of a
14,
point because
those 14 people probably didn't watch all the way through.
So I want to go a little bit deeper, just a teensy bit deeper, because if I get too deep, you guys are gonna like see the eyes or the idea of God, and therefore your brain will explode. Dorita even goes even further into this idea that we are pretending. When we, for instance, use words and language, he wants us to remember that the only reason we make sense out of the things that we hear when people speak is because we made up languages so that it was easier for us to communicate. Anything that you say is a sound, and that's it. It's at the basis that because I can make words with mouth and you hear word and go, wow, that word, you can then understand what I'm trying to say. And he says it's all fake. It's all made up. Everything that we do.
Well, that sounds like an opinion mixed in with undisputable fact, if I'm being completely honest. Because,
Right.
of course, it's a fact that we make sounds and we put meaning into the sounds so we can communicate with each other. But when you put that with your opinion, that nothing, that in the beginning and in the end, none of it made sense in the first place. Of course it doesn't, because we're the ones that give it meaning. If humans cease to exist, it no longer exists. Or if no trace of it remains, of course it never existed. Of course it never existed in the first place for whoever is present.
So then that's basically his argument then why we should not we should not approach literature in the terms of what meaning it's supposed to have, but rather than deconstructing, which is why he created the term of deconstruction, of deconstructing the text based off of not what the intention of a text is, but what the experiences of the reader is.
I think that should be the point of reading.
So his whole idea is that when you're reading something to what?
Reading something
the author intended. So if, for instance, you're reading of Mice and Men, and the intention that Steinbeck had was that you're supposed to look at the beginning of the book and the end of the book as the Garden of Eden. And you're supposed to think of George, in his last name, which is, why can't I think of it? George Milton. And you're supposed to make that connection that Milton was the person who wrote Paradise Lost, which Paradise Lost is about the story of Adam and Eve. You're supposed to make those connections. But if you're going into it and you don't make those connections, Dorita says you are doing exactly what you're supposed to do as a reader. So you're supposed to just ignore all that. If you know a guy named George and he killed your wife 14 years ago, you are also supposed to put that into the text as well. All of your experiences are now going to change and shift the text, and therefore the meaning that you get out of it is not supposed to be this intended meaning. The meaning goes to you. If you don't like George because it reminds you of the person that murdered your wife, you're never going to like George. Just like if you think of candy and your first thought is, oh, that's interesting, I like the taste of candy, you have now created new meaning out of the text, regardless if that was the intent or not. Dorita says there is no intent. You need to stop thinking of intent and start thinking for yourself.
That's like the opposite and also a good version of intersectionality. And intersectionality is inherently, the way it's been described to me as a bad thing. Well, if you haven't lived through this experience, then you cannot comment on it. But I think this would be almost the opposite, where your experiences and your opinions are the only thing that does matter. It doesn't matter what anybody else has to say to it. It is what you get out of the book, and however your experience is to get that. Also, Eaton, I really do think I'm going to suggest something really quickly, just because I think Dorita might be an inspiration to it. I mentioned him earlier, Exerbia. He has a video called "We're the Last Humans Left." I think that's exactly what you're talking about. I just think
Nice. Any thoughts on Dorita? I'm not trying the biographical people are like, bruh, you gotta look at
If I'm
why
being
this was
completely
written."
honest, all of this talk just made me hate literature a bit more.
for
Yeah,
me
I didn't like it.
personally,
I don't like him
who
either.
loves dissecting. Like, or discuss the books. If you're looking at what the author's life was and how that, like Shakespeare's life isn't interesting, in my opinion, because there's nothing super interesting. It's a retelling of a Greek myth, and nothing much will be added to my experience. But maybe new historicism or deconstructionism would. And Animal Farm is a great one to use Marxism on, but Harry Potter probably won't be. Well, actually, there's
Actually, can't.
I mean, that was it. Let me say something else. How about Thomas the Tank Engine? I don't think there's very much Marxist intent in
Well,
that. And I still read those books, like the books every so often, because they're well written.
I think a few episodes of the show might deal with money and
I don't know about that,
the
actually. It's about
the-
trains, Mr. Eaton. It's not about Marxism.
well,
Thomas the Train isn't going, hey,
if you look at
this
Marxism
market
in the
is
most
dependent
simplest,
on the consumer, and if the consumer is gone, we take out the middleman and give everybody the same.
yeah,
Listen,
but I
no
mean that's
heavy
like the
hitting
most
topics in
basic
Thomas the
for
Tank Engine.
Marxism. There's actually more layers to it, but we wouldn't have time in even an honors class to go over everything. It's not just that, it's also about isolation. It's about how culture sees other cultures. Marxism is like this much bigger thing. I just went over the money thing because that's the easiest to go over in class. So you would have to say, how does money and culture affect someone being in isolation? And I think there might be an episode or two in Thomas the Tank Engine that might deal with people who feel other train engines that feel sad and alone.
You know, the thing I love about philosophy is that you can equate it to literally anything. Like, me as a person, I could talk about how a frog directly correlates to like fried chicken being wasted, because you can make those connections. But existentialism or nihilism or Marxist, you can apply them to anything. Like existentialism, you could say, I don't know, give me anything in the world. I'll try and equate it back to existential.
Hold up, I got it.
What do you got?
Fans.
Fans, like the like to cool you down?
Yes, the fan I'm currently looking at in my room.
Okay. So let's say a person has a fan. That means they're hot. Maybe they can't afford air conditioning. They're living in poverty. Maybe they're trying to support their dreams. Maybe they want to become a rabbi. They support spiritualism. They believe in a God. That's how they're going to go. Their purpose is finding that God. And if on the way to achieve that, they can't pay for the air conditioning, that is all means to an end. And that's a really, really shoddy way to put it, but everything has to do with somebody's purpose in life, and you can equate it any way you want.
The person stares at the fan. The fan continues to go around and around. The person who has the fan looks at the blade. The blade continues to go around and around. And Mr.
Sort of
Michael...
like the pain in his life just goes
I was
around in a
yeah,
circle each
that's
year.
what I was going for, yeah. It's like, and as the blade continues to move around and around, he wonders, is this what his marriage is?
No.
Just the blades of a fan. Yeah, I'm sorry if that you guys hate literature now. I actually
I
really
love
like how
literature.
complicated it can be.
Now I'm not committed
cut
to
out?
read literature again.
What's called literature literature only becomes complicated when people ask for you to view literature in a certain way. Because
I wouldn't say so. Some literature is just complicated. But I do see your point where you're saying, like, you could have a book like The Little Prince where it's very simple at first, but if somebody said, hey, look at it as an adult, you could see it different. I see what you're saying. I would just disregard that. That's more about the complexity, less about...
Yeah.
Yeah, so disregard that. That was kind of a knee-jerk response there.
There's a reason why I will not read a little book called Infinite Jest. Because the first few pages will literally leave you not understanding a single thing.
So I have a query. Okay, so I'm hoping that a majority of the people in this call have either know about this book or at least have read it, or at least stated they read it, or at least had questions about it. And it's called The Glass Castle.
Oof.
And
I
Did that my sophomore year.
Yeah, and I've always felt like it's difficult to teach The Glass Castle without being preachy about, its meanings and its contents and its ideas. It's a tough text to teach multiple angles to, for instance. And I've always wondered if the type of questions that are being asked all are kind of forcing, in a way, the way in which the general idea of the text is supposed to be antiquated or thought of, if it makes any sense.
I just really quickly want to say I have a very specific answer to this, and this is nothing against Miss Agar. I like her as a teacher, but we did the Glass Castle, right? And most days we had, it was set up in a way where we could just discuss it, but since, because of the circumstances, us being online, our conversations boiled down to the parents are bad. So the format was switched to a Jamboard where we would answer specific questions. And I don't think you can do that with a book like The Glass Castle. Because if you're going to give me a question that has one specific answer, there's no room for open interpretation. And I think that can be a big problem about it. Because, on another book, we were reading The Hate You Give, which itself could be looked at a couple different ways. But one of the questions I won't ever forget was... was this person's actions contradictory because they are a police officer? Or no, it wasn't that. It was, what is contradictory about this person's actions because they are police officers? And that gave, if I was to answer that, I have to answer and I have to admit that there is indeed a contradiction, which then would make me say, so this person is African American and they are a police officer. These things are contradictory, so I'm now looking at it a specific way rather than deciding for myself, this is contradictory or this isn't. And since the Glass Castle is about poverty and it's really easy to, as you said, get preachy, you can't have that. It really needs, I feel like it'd almost be better to read the book just by yourself before looking at everybody else's opinions. Because I definitely had opinions presented to me throughout the book that made me think, and that I wouldn't have thought of myself. I didn't agree with them, but I would have much preferred to hear them after I'd seen how the book was going to end. Because the way I interpreted the book fundamentally changed once those ideas were presented.
Yeah, I agree. I think that sometimes it's a hard avenue as a teacher because you want to pester, and maybe pester is not the right word, but we want to create thought, right? We want thoughtful ideas and creative thinking and critical thinking skills that we're trying to get out of these texts. But at the same time, I feel like sometimes we make it too narrow, and that then creates a huge web of problems, because then we're forcing an ideology, and that's not the intent of literature. At least I don't think it's supposed to be. I don't think everyone is supposed to read Of Mice and Men and get the same idea.
Sometimes it feels like some teachers are trying to engineer a specific response.
Yeah, and I don't like that.
To your credit, I like the Socratic seminar method, which it's harder to work online, I understand that. But when we read, Night or Mice and Men, or any of the books that could have a lot of depth to them depending on how much you wanted to look into it, you had just some completely opposite ideas. Like, you might have one person asking about, specific characters. You have the really annoying kid whose names rhyme with Bolus, who's trying to present some sort of philosophical side that nobody wanted to hear about, and everybody on the side's just like, ugh. But you got all the different opinions without, us. You were allowed to accept the different opinions, but it wasn't, you wouldn't be wrong for them, I guess.
Yeah, as long as you're able to back up what you're trying to say, right?
And you can back up a lot of things
thing.
with very little evidence, and that was the beautiful thing about it.
I mean, that's the reason why I kind of, when you're in Honors 1, it's like, hey, remember this way of thinking that you've been used to? Well, that's one specific type of way of looking at literature, which is called formalism. That's why it's called the formal way of looking at things. There are other ways of looking at literature, and I just try to thrust upon you guys, hey, look, you can look at it as psychoanalytical, you can look at it as biographical, new historicism, Marxism, deconstruction. There's so many different ways of looking at literature than just one way, and because of that, you can get different types of meanings than just what's the author's purpose, which is such a SAT forward way of looking at things. And I don't like that. It stops the free flow of information, and it goes back to the idea that there is a correct answer. And that's not what literature is supposed to be. Literature is not supposed to be, this is how you're supposed to interpret something. No!
With poetry especially, that's something that's really, really changed freshman year in comparison to years past. Normally it would be, here's the poem, this is what's meant by it. Not, here's the poem, what do you think?
Right, and the worst part is that our year got cut off because of COVID, and so we didn't get to the part where you guys got to kind of figure things out yourself and I wasn't able to give you all the tools to try to figure these little puzzles out, which kind of sucks. But I mean, that's how the cookie crumbles.
That do be how it do be sometimes.
Yeah. I think we got a little off topic there. Lamado, do you have anything you'd like to add for existentialism or nihilism?
Still hate literature, but I would like to mention one thing, going back to the Glass Castle just a little bit. It's been a long time since I read that book, like in class, even on my own. Let me just admit, I don't remember most of my opinions, but looking back on it now, I felt like the main thing of that story that I got out of it was it's just a family, no matter how imperfect they are. Like, the dad was so messed up, some of the children were messed up, the mother was just struggling so much, and the main daughter was just like, oh, well, I'm just gonna try to tell the story as best as I can. I still feel like it's that idea of this family is just working on whatever they can. And even when fortune hits them, misfortune is literally around the corner with a bazooka. And now they have to move again. That's what I remember so much. Just like, hey, they found a new home. Not. Like 1 week later, well, we found another home.
Uh-huh.
That's what I found the most out of the Glass Castle. And it's like, I followed these characters. I'm like, I didn't exactly have a favorite character or never tried to like label a character like, oh, the father is just a bad parent. He traumatized his kids. Or his mother was just like never supportive or anything. But it's like, I don't know, his father was just doing what he can with what he got.
And
What-
what he got was potentially molested from his mother, which
That-
really
that
messed
part
him
I
up.
don't
For a
remember.
start,
That part I don't remember.
yeah, that's what I wrote my essay about.
There's also something at the beginning that kind of hints that he might have been responsible for the death of his daughter.
Which
That's
daughter?
really where the drinking started. Was
Yeah.
the death of his first.
Oh
first
yeah,
born,
with the
second born.
baby. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, it was a newborn. Yeah, I remember that.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's kind of the father's way, and I wish I remembered his name. I just feel like
Rex.
Rex.
Rick's. Thank you. Okay, it's Rick's way of just like he's a mess up, and he's had a very terrible life, and he's trying to give his family something different, but it's not working, and he's just living with it and trying to fix it, even still screwing it up along the way.
I think
That's what
there's I think there's a lot of self-medicating going on in Rex's life.
Because like
Yeah.
he's drinking all the time, didn't he normally get into fights as well and steal a bunch of
Yeah.
money and just
Uh-huh.
yeah. So it's like he's trying to take, I guess, his family's life back. In a sense, I don't know how to really word that well.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to make his family a little bit happy, whatever way he can. But he just knows the minute he does that, yeah, there's gonna already be repercussions knocking at his door.
He has so many ambitions to try to do everything he can to avoid his
Yeah.
real family that he goes crawling back to the same town that made him feel as miserable as he does by the end of the book before he, dies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I gotta say, one last thing before we, move on to, the end, but or whatever.
Yeah.
I've been putting this off because I can't remember who said it. I think it was a Art of Manly podcast. It was on anyways, it was on the topic of philosophy, and it's something that's helped me a little bit in my life, but it's something that's been a little bit lost, and I think a lot of nihilists went through it. It's the idea that if you are at a point where you are depressed and you are down and you are low and there's nowhere else for you to go and you're in this darkness, that dwelling in that can help you find some answers. And I think, and this is nothing against antidepressants or anything; those are definitely help. I'm just saying sometimes when people aren't like seriously depressed to the point where they cannot live their life, people just find a coping mechanism rather than questioning the thing that's made them feel the way they do in the first place. And I think a lot of philosophers, and especially nihilists, have come up with nihilism as their answers. So, for example, Nietzsche, he did have, I think it was syphilis at this point in his life, but he wrote one of his most famous books, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, in 10 days He went up to a mountain, wrote this book, didn't eat or drink any. I think he had water the whole time he was there, and came down and published this book. And that was like a defining moment in his life before he really lost. It's arguable. Whether he had lost his wits at that. I think a lot of people have some sort of experience that'll help. Like, for example, Mainlander and Nietzsche were both in the army at one time, and they both ended up being nihilists that, whether their opinions differed, believed that God had died and that he was dead, and that the answer was no, in simplest terms.
Dang.
There's a, I guess since we're still technically on the topic of philosophy, there's actually one media, and I know like you two have probably never played this game, but this game kind of actually hit me unlike any others. A little game called Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. And in this game, there is this is the main antagonist, the boss. And the boss is literally a mother to the main character, Snake. She is the mother, she is the teacher, she is everything to this man. And she betrays him, her country, just to help the Russians. And in this, it is this idea where, at the end, this is going to go into a bit of spoilers, the idea of finally meeting the boss, to fighting the boss after all challenges have met, is the idea of taking her life, because that is what you have built up to. There's a quote I actually pulled up, and I want to just say it a little bit. Let me find it again. Life's end. Isn't it beautiful? It's almost tragic. When life ends, it gives off a final lingering aroma. Light is but a farewell gift from the darkness to those on their way to die. I've been waiting, Snake, for a long time, waiting for your birth, your growth, and the finality of today. She was ready to just lay down her life because she was waiting for the day to finally die, to pass on the torch to this man. Even though she betrayed him, almost left him for dead, she was still waiting for the day for him to come back. And again, spoilers, she does die. But it is that idea. Yes, but if you want to understand a little more, go play the game. It's on PlayStation. But I'm just sugarcoating that she just dies. But there is more to her death than reason. That it also, her death kind of formed almost like a century's worth of philosophy within a franchise of video games, written by a man that loves nothing but just so many random jokes and different philosophies. She was kind of the birth of all of that.
I would kind of finishing out on that. I would say, since we're on the topic of nihilism, if there are people who consider that, there was one thing. It's a very simple thing, but it made me think. For those who believe in nothing and say, well, it's inevitable. We're just going to die someday. There's also the thought that every other day we're going to live. And there's a Tolkien quote. I love a lot of what Tolkien has to say, but this particular one was, "Darkness must pass, a new day will come, and when the sun shines, it will shine all the clouds." And I think that's like the complete.
It is the idea that what stirred killing his former master was the idea that he believed the boss were meant something, that soldiers were never left behind, that they never died, that they actually meant something to the world, that they could actually have a purpose. snake that literally that had an outer haven for child soldiers. Just this man
Shout out to
literally
you.
took. Yeah, this of suffering. And at the very finale of Metal Gear Solid, with the 4th entry, Guns of the Patriots, it is that idea where he finally realized, yes, this is not what the boss wanted. Because there were so many other players hiding in the shadows as well of this entire story. That kind of just fooled Snake and just be like, oh, well, I was just a pawn. And this world is still not perfect for soldiers.
I don't know how we're going to...
What I'm trying to get at basically is just like one man trying to take the words of the person that he loved the most, the person he idolized for all his life, for the training that he had, for the ideas that was put in his head, was just like he took that and he tried to put that in his own way. He tried to force that on the world, tried to force that on others. And in return, while he may think he won, in fact, it was just far from over. Misery was about to hit his corner every second.
Sounds like Misery Was by Exerbia. Another video. I don't know how we're going to transition from this to like, all right, do you think earwax is funny?
I think we could, though.
And we're going to do that now.
Yeah, let's do that.
Question
What
number one.
Weekly question number 1.
I feel like I could
Do
say
you put
anything at
milk
this point
in
because I
before
don't know anybody
cereal
who
or
would have
cereal in
listened this
before
far.
milk?
Like, I don't know anybody who hasn't been scared off by the, like, so I'm 14 and think I know the nuances of life at this point. No one's
we
like,
lost
ooh,
2 of
yeah,
our
let's get to the
guys, so-
silly questions.
We lost 2 of our guys throughout this podcast, so...
Is it just the 3 of us left?
Yeah, it's just the
Yeah.
three of us now.
Besides Craigbot.
We did it, guys.
I mean,
All
Craigbot's
right.
been here the entire time, so we gotta give him credit,
All hail
too.
Craigbot. All hail Craigbot.
All hail
He is
Craigbot.
everywhere. Omnipotent.
All hail Craigbot.
OnlyFans Craigbot win.
Here we go. That one's really dumb. Okay, why not? What happens when you get scared half to death twice?
You die. I mean, if the records are
I probably laughed to my death.
Well, according to Dorita, there is no being scared half to death. In fact, death has no meaning. Why are you scared of it? Move on with life.
Well, according to the men of the 1950s, why did it only scare you half to death? Halfway is 50%. 50% is not 100%. 100% is winning, 50% is failing. If you're not winning, go back, training it better. So next time, you better die all the way or you're not coming back here.
The worst that really just happens to me is a bad nightmare, and I'm like, whatever, next morning.
Oh my god, this next question's real dumb. Are we ready for the next one?
Ready for the next.
If a bunch of cats jump on top of each other, is it still called a dog pile?
No, it's a cat pile.
No, it's a dog pile of cats, because if a bunch of humans dog pile, it's still a dog pile, even if you're not dogs.
No, I still say cat pile. Then it's a human pile if it's just a bunch of people piling on each other.
Yeah, I still think it's a dog pile. I mean, we came up with the with the words dog pile. I don't think that
Why
just
not
because it's
branch
a
it out?
different. I don't think that just because it's now cats that we need to change the animal of the title of the word. The word just helps us associate with what is happening, right? It's not supposed to. We don't call it a human pile, right? Oh, look at that human pile.
I mean, that could be a lot of different
from
terms
Full
right
Metal
there.
Jacket? Pile on?
Yes.
You remember Pile from Full Metal Jacket? That
I
incredibly
do.
depressing movie from which I only watched the first half because of a video essay that was trying to equate a philosophy to it. Yeah, that guy, Human Pile, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
This is such a flawed, system. I'll say something and I'm like, I immediately regret that. Just like
Yeah.
real life. But it's being recorded!
Woo! Thank you to the
Gonna
three
go get a
people who have
job
made it all the
someday
way
and
back
somebody's
over
gonna be
here.
like, oh god.
We appreciate you, my 14 people who watch this. And when I mean the 14 people, I mean the 14 people who watch it in the first minute and then
Maybe
click off
there's
the
3
video.
people and they just watch. Maybe it's just 7 people and they all watch it twice.
I watched like
here's an
2
experiment.
podcasts, and this one isn't one of them. I'm sorry.
If you've made it this far, you get 10 extra credit points if in the comment you type the sentence "Cats don't dig on dancing." I'll
That's
give
a
you 10
good
extra
idea.
credit points.
You should just hide that, but
Easy.
you can't make it at the same time every video. Just like it's a cryptic hint for extra credit every week. Mr. Ewing comes up, he's like, Eaton, are you trying to get your YouTube popular by grading your kids on whether you watch it? And you're like, no.
It's his
Covers
way
the
of
blow.
monetization.
We're trying to get the ad revenue, Ewing. That's important to us. Just okay.
We need the money. Do we
Look.
want to do one more?
Let's
One
do
more.
one more.
Okay, I'm trying to find a good one.
Can't believe I've spent almost 2 hours of my day doing this.
I know.
No regrets, but like,
Right,
I
right.
could have been reading
You
something.
say that, but then you'll regret it later.
Well, I could have finished my book by now, so.
I could have kept.
I could
Trying
have
to find a
found
good
out
one.
where Joe lives. Or the sick one, whoever the sick one is.
The
We
sick
can
one.
scare. We'll finish the job if he's been sicked half to death. We'll sick him with the cat this time. Boo ah boo ah.
I actually know where he lives, so if we wanted to all go over there and scare him, then
Oh my
I feel like-
goodness.
I feel like that'd be like a boundary. Like I don't think Eaton would be allowed to like drive us in his personal vehicle outside, like not sanctioned by the school. He just shows up. He's like, "Hey, we're going. Don't
No,
tell
he
your
gets, like,
parents.
the
Leave your
personal,
phone
like,
here."
small white bus, and we just drive over across town to Joe's place.
Yeah,
Right. I'm trying to
Last-
find a really good question, and like the past 10 have been really dumb ones. I mean, I should probably
May as
not
well.
do a dumb.
What you should do is, like, next time, just already have questions lined up, like good
That's
questions
a
lined
good.
up.
You know what? A good
Like,
podcast would probably do that.
but we're not a
You
good
know?
podcast. We're a great podcast.
We're the
We're
best.
too good for prep time.
You know they're a good podcast when you can't find them on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and or Apple
Yeah, they're
Podcasts.
the best.
Only YouTube,
You know we're good when we have people leave and halfway through the podcast.
and they don't even say why. They're just like, "I'm gonna go."
Yeah.
Like
Right.
somebody very sadly breaking up with someone else. It's not working out.
Here's our final question. If you were famous, how did you become famous?
Okay, I gotta think about this because there's funny answers.
I think mine is obvious. It's obviously going to be this podcast.
The
and
most consistent
YouTube
Dr. Pepper drinker.
I finally win the title officially of Ultra Virgin. I collect all the dual discs, and people just know me, and they go, "That man is the most pure man in the entire world."
You realize what you are at that point?
What?
You're the king of games.
You did it.
Okay, but like
You would finally be able to out pizza the Hut.
no, impossible. No one
You've
out Pizza
done
the
it.
Hut.
You can't break it now. You can't go back.
You
oh,
did it.
oh God. I tore
Now-
one too
now
many
who's gonna unhut the
mattress
pizza,
tags
huh?
off.
The Pizza Huts just don't. They don't just give up. They literally vanish from existence. All of our minds
You
forget
have to eat the
that they
pizza.
exist.
You are now
word-
Pizza the
The
Hut.
word pizza and hut are gone from our minds entirely. We can't think of those two words together anymore.
Hey, what's
We
that
now
restaurant
call
on
it
the corner
food
by the
discs.
intersection? Huh?
Are
mean
you
Subway?
ready for some food discs this weekend? Dude, my favorite food disc is cheese and bacon.
On the topic of food discs, I was for Boy Scouts. I was volunteering for this like soup kitchen thing once, and we were serving hot dogs. And I was like, I'm not calling them that. And I was like, "Ma'am, would you like a meat cylinder?" She's like, "What?" So I can never It's a meat cylinder and a meat sheath. That's what they're called, and I can never undo that. Like somebody offers me a hot dog, I'm like, oh man, a meat cylinder.
Oh yeah, the meat cylinders are hot today.
That's our title. That's our title for the podcast. Meat cylinders.
Oh, there you go.
The meat
We are the
cylinders
meat
are made of cat
cylinders.
meat. The meat cylinders are made of cat meat, but
made
are
of
they still dogs?
Oh, I don't like hot dogs. I prefer hot kitten.
Hot kittens.
Hey, that could be what we're
Trademark.
eating for all we know, honestly.
Oh, I
That
feel
could be
like
in
I just got
somewhere
myself
around the
on
world.
on a watch list after saying that.
It's okay. I'm definitely on a watch list. It's like it's that thing where it's like edging the FBI, and the guy looks up how to build a pressure cooker bomb, and he's like slowly dragging the mouse over the like search bar.
I'm
Wait a
pretty sure 5 FBI guys are watching me record right now, so you all are good.
He's like, "Come do something. You're being boring."
Their podcast is so successful. Two of the members of the podcast left.
They were too blown away.
They couldn't.
They weren't ready
Could
for
not
meat.
handle the
They weren't-
neutron style.
They weren't ready for meat cylinders.
They
They
could
can't
not
handle
handle
the
the
meat
neutron
cylinders.
style. Eisenhower after nuking the Japanese. They could not handle the neutron style.
Got a blast.
Oh man! After this, I'm gonna have to go to.
We're gonna have to talk to Nickelodeon to bring back Jimmy Neutron now.
I'm gonna have to go to a food
stars.
place.
Ice candy. Yeah, I wonder if they serve
This
meat
place?
cylinders there.
Do
Do you think they serve meat cylinder slices on the food discs?
Oh my.
Dude.
Just episode 1. The gang out pizzas the hut.
Who's gonna unhut the pizza next?
Oh man, I am not I'm not a fan of that. Anyways, I think it's time for us to just.
This is a good stop. This is a good
That's a good
stop.
stopping
honestly.
point.
Yeah.
Everybody,
We can't go any
final Hail
farther.
Craig bot and sign
Hail
off.
Craig
then.
bot.
Hollis, it is no. Before we leave, Hollis,
okay,
remember it is your job this week to come up with a topic that we will discuss for next week. It could be
Have we
literally
decided
anything.
Meat
the
cylinders.
Have we decided the recording date?
Yeah, we'll
I'm-
have to. I don't.
Why don't we
Monday
just go in the?
or
We'll
Tuesday.
decide that in the Discord because we need to decide that with everybody.
Yeah, I'm gonna say right now, pretty much Monday to Thursday is pretty much good with me. So any of those days.
I'm a very mixed bag week to week. So, anyways, we'll decide later.
Okay,
I will
sounds
come
good.
up with something.
Like say it in the chat, and then we'll all respond what we're all.
And if I can't make it to this one, I will pass that on to someone else till next week. But
Okay.
I think I'll probably be able to record. So, anyways, everyone want to introduce yourself, give a final Hail Craig bot, and we'll end out the episode.
That sounds good.
Okay, I am once again Hollis Narkevich, Hail Craig bot.
I am Lamato. You can find my channel under this video's description. Hail Craigbot.
And I am Mr. Eden with Mr. Eden's weekly videos. Signing off. Bye, everybody. Goodbye, Craigbot.
I love you, Craigbot.
Craigbot. Hey, 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 hey. Ooh. Bye.
Farewell.
Sayonara.